Have you ever felt like you were being watched? Not just a passing glance, but something deeper, something that lingers like eyes on the back of your neck, even when you're alone. This story, it's not something I like to talk about, but it's true, every word of it. And it still keeps me up at night. It happened about 5 years ago. I was 19, fresh out of high school, and my best friend, Sarah, invited me to her family's cabin in the woods. It was one of those places you see in movies, rustic, secluded, surrounded by miles of dense forest, the kind of place where you can't even get cell service, just the two of us, a cooler of snacks and a weekend of freedom. Or so we thought. We arrived just before sunset. The cabin was charming in a creepy kind of way. Old, wooden, with a porch that creaked with every step. Sarah's parents hadn't been there in months, so the air inside was stale, like it had been holding its breath. We unpacked, started a fire in the fireplace, and laughed about how cliché it all felt. Two girls alone in the woods. But as the sun dipped below the trees, the mood shifted. It started small, little things like the feeling that we weren't alone. Sarah swore she heard footsteps on the porch, but when we checked, there was nothing. Just the wind, she said. Then, around midnight, we heard it, a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the front door. We froze. Neither of us moved. I mean, who would be out here? The nearest town was 20 miles away. Sarah grabbed a flashlight and peeked through the window. Nothing, just darkness. We tried to laugh it off, maybe it was a branch or an animal, but deep down, we both knew something wasn't right. Things got worse. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside our window, slow, shuffling steps, like someone was circling the cabin. I nudged Sarah, and we both lay there, listening. That's when we heard it. A whisper. Just one word, barely audible. We didn't sleep after that. We locked every door, closed every curtain, and sat in the living room with the fire roaring, but the sounds didn't stop. Footsteps, knocking, whispers. It was like whatever was out there was playing with us, testing us. And then we saw it. Through the crack in the curtains, I saw a face. Pale, almost glowing in the moonlight. Its eyes, they were black, empty. It just stood there staring at me. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, and then it smiled. We screamed. We grabbed our stuff and bolted for the car. I don't even remember driving away. All I remember is the sound of Sarah crying and the feeling of those eyes, still watching us. We told the police, of course. They searched the cabin, the woods, everything. But they found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, just nothing. Sarah's family sold the cabin a month later. Neither of us has been back since. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. The knocking, the whispers, and I can't shake the feeling that it's still out there. Watching, waiting. And if it found us once, it can find us again. Have you ever been driving late at night? The kind of late where the road feels endless and the world feels empty? That's when it happens. When the silence gets too loud and your mind starts playing tricks on you. But what if it's not a trick? What if the thing you're afraid of is real? This story happened to me about 3 years ago. I was driving home from a friend's house after a sleepover. It was around 2 a.m. and the roads were deserted. Just me, my car, and the occasional streetlight casting long shadows on the asphalt. I was tired, but I was almost home. Or so I thought. That's when I saw him, a man standing on the side of the road. He was just there. No car, no phone, no explanation. He was tall, wearing a dark coat, and his face was hidden under a hood. I slowed down, thinking maybe he needed help, but something about him made my skin crawl. So I kept driving. About 10 minutes later, I saw him again. The same man, same coat, same hood. But this time, he was closer to the road, almost like he was waiting for me. I told myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe he was hitchhiking. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I kept driving, trying to shake the feeling, but then I saw him a third time. This time, he was standing in the middle of the road, just standing there like he was waiting for me to hit him. I swerved, my heart pounding, and sped past him. I didn't look back. I couldn't. When I got home, I locked the doors and tried to forget about it. But the next morning, I found something in my car, a handprint on the passenger side window. It was huge, like it belonged to someone much bigger than me. And it wasn't there before. I never saw the man again. But sometimes, when I'm driving late at night, I feel like he's still out there, watching, waiting. And I can't shake the feeling that one day, he'll find me. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, convinced something was in your room with you? That feeling of dread, like the darkness itself is alive? This story, it's not something I talk about often, but it's real, and it still haunts me. It happened when I was 16. I was staying over at my cousin Emily's house for the weekend. Her parents were out of town, so it was just the two of us. We stayed up late watching movies, eating junk food, and laughing about stupid stuff. Normal sleepover things, but then things got weird. Around 2 a.m. we heard a noise, a loud thud from upstairs. Emily's house was old, so we figured it was just the pipes or the wind. But then we heard it again, and again, like something or someone was walking around up there. We tried to brush it off. Emily said it was probably just the house settling, but then we saw it, a shadow, moving in the hallway. It was tall, too tall to be human, and it just stood there, swaying slightly, like it was waiting for us to notice it. We froze. Neither of us could move. The shadow didn't do anything at first, it just watched us. And then it started moving, slowly, deliberately toward the stairs. That's when we ran. We locked ourselves in Emily's room and called the police. The police came and searched the house. They didn't find anything. No signs of a break-in, no footprints, nothing. They said it was probably our imaginations, but we both knew what we saw. That shadow, it was real. Emily moved out a few months later. She said she couldn't sleep in that house anymore. And honestly, I don't blame her. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that whatever we saw that night, it's still out there, watching, waiting. Have you ever heard something you couldn't explain? A voice, a whisper, when you knew you were alone? This story, it's not something I like to think about, but it's true. Every word of it. And it still gives me chills. It happened when I was 14. I was staying over at my friend Jake's house. His parents were out of town, so it was just the two of us. We were playing video games in the basement, laughing and having a good time. But then, things got weird. Around midnight, we heard it. A whisper. At first, we thought it was the TV, but it was off. Then we thought it was the wind, but the windows were closed. The whisper was faint, almost like it was coming from the walls. We couldn't make out what it was saying, but it sounded angry. We tried to ignore it. Jake said it was probably just the house settling, but then we saw it. A shadow moving in the corner of the room. It was small, like a child, but it moved too fast to be human. We both froze, staring at it, until it disappeared into the wall. We didn't sleep that night. We stayed up, huddled together on the couch, listening to the whispers. They never stopped. They just kept going, getting louder and more frantic until the sun came up. That's when they finally stopped. We called the police, but they didn't find anything. No signs of a break-in, no footprints, nothing. They said it was probably our imaginations, but we both knew what we saw. That shadow, those whispers, they were real. Jake moved out a few months later. He said he couldn't sleep in that house anymore. And honestly, I don't blame him. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that whatever we saw that night, it's still out there, watching, waiting.